Okay. Well,
Hey, hey.
welcome. Hey, everybody. We
Hey,
got a full crew here.
I know, right? We had to like send out for an extra big couch.
This is one of custom order
Uh-huh.
gigantic couch to house everybody. Um, so hey, welcome everybody. For those attending Container Day today that may have not seen or not familiar with Containers from the Couch, this is a live show that Brent and myself do Monday through Thursday, where we talk about all things containers on on AWS, and we talk a lot about EKS. And today specifically, we're doing a special. As you can see, we have some guests on the show, specifically related to some of all the talks that are going around with the Container Day today at KubeCon, prior to Day Zero, KubeCon EU. And boy, were there some pretty awesome announcements today. As you know, I get, Brent, you can attest to this. I get really excited over announcements. I just do. It's like Hanukkah and Christmas all combined for me. It's really wonderful. So
It's amazing.
and so specifically what we're going to do right now is the whole point of this session is to do a live Q&A. So we had some really great talks from Nate down there. We had Jay Pipes do a great talk on ACK. ACK. I don't know, there's going to be 25 different ways to pronounce it. But
That should be what like we should.
ACK. ACK.
Ack.
What about ick?
Not ACK. ACK.
Is it AMI or AMI? This
It's
is the
Amy.
question.
Definitely Ami.
It's Amy.
Then it's eight.
this is how you lose friends, folks, is you just mispronounce acronyms and everyone gets angry. So the good news is we're not going to debate over that. We're going to let this one, we're going to table this for next time. But we want to do some live Q&A and kind of discuss, any questions that you folks have about what's been talked about today. We want to just discuss it live, and we have some really smart people here right now. So I want to make sure we utilize their brains.
For sure. Yeah,
Okay.
because like I'm the least smart person here, so I'm just gonna sit back and laugh a lot and wonder how we spell ack. Like
ACK.
oh right. That's right. And
Where should we start, guys?
why is no one suggesting ache?
Ache.
Oh, no.
It has been a bit of an ache.
It's supposed to be joyous, not painful.
Okay, just checking.
Delightful.
So let's just talk real quick about what was introduced. Bob started us off in the keynote, which, by the way, was live and awesome. We're really experimenting with this whole live format, and I'm kind of liking how things are turning out. So watch us continue to iterate on that. But so Bob introduced us to a lot of new announcements, right? So one of them was ACK. One of them, though, was one of the things that I liked was custom AMIs for your managed node group. What's that all about? Like, why is that cool or important?
This is super cool, Brent. I'm glad you brought it up. Or maybe, Jesse, do you want to talk about this? You can.
I can.
I feel like I scooped you.
No, so you know so much. This is one of the things I know about, so I can take a little real estate. So managed node groups allow you to depend on the EKS service to manage the life cycle of your nodes and your clusters. So not only can you use EKS to, like Bob said, address that toil, of creating clusters and keeping them running, you can shift that to us, but you can also do it in your data plane with your nodes. And so with managed node groups, you're still using EC2 instances and an auto scaling group that's in your account, but it's provisioned for you, and the lifecycle management of those nodes is done for you. There's a lot of automation around it, and you get updates. So there's lots of cool stuff. I know I love this being on the show because I just am talking, and then Adam and Brent will just laugh, and they're just laughing at the chat, and I'm just like, is there something in my teeth? I don't know.
Poor
sorry
Jesse.
about that.
Every time we
It's all
do
good.
it.
It's all good. I love it.
It's like, did he mispronounce ack? What? We're not laughing at you.
So getting ACK on track. So
Nice.
yeah, that was so cheesy. So managed node groups are awesome, but if you have needs for your nodes that are around, customization, or if you need to use your own AMI, if you have additional software you want to install and configure for every node when it's deployed, that hasn't been available yet. So that's where this new feature set comes in. Thank you. The new feature set around support for launch templates and custom AMIs in managed node groups. So if you have the need to universally use a different Linux distro, for example, if your org is aligned on something that isn't Amazon Linux 2, you can do that now. Or if you have some hardening that you want to do, or some OS configuration at a deep level, you can do that now in your own AMI and provide it to managed node groups. So effectively, this whole realm of customization that was forcing you to lean into self-managed nodes, you can now explore the benefits of managed node groups. And it's all facilitated through launch templates. So, you can specify things like, your instance type or instance tags, security groups, the storage configuration, like all of that stuff that you have in a launch template. There's a couple things that aren't supported, which the documentation and the launch blog will go into, and I'll bring up in the talk. I think my talk on this is the next session. But for the most part, you can do a ton of stuff, and you can specify your own AMI, which is really great. So you can go off and bake your own, in the talk, I actually use like a RHEL 7 AMI that I built, and then it's Stig hardened. And
Nice.
then I say, hey, Cass, go make an autoscaling group for me. And through the managed node groups magic, it does. And the next thing you know, I've got nodes spinning up. If I wanted to update them, if I wanted to offline them, EKS will do all the needful around draining down your work and keeping your application services available. It's pretty great. So it's bringing all of those features that we know customers love in managed node groups into the world of where you really couldn't use them before, it's pretty awesome.
Very cool. What else did we talk about, or did Bob
many
mention?
things.
A ton of stuff.
There is the Helm support in ECR, and I know there's been a lot of ask around that.
So explain that one to me, because ECR is for holding containers. So what are we going to do with Helm charts there? I don't understand.
Nate Tabor.
Am I on the spot for this? So I'm not. One of the things
It could be me, but I just talked for 5 minutes. So
I'm gonna do my best for this one because I'm close but not super close, but we're really excited about this. I mean, at a high level, like this is really going along with a lot of the work that's been going around in the community to expand the OCI spec, right? So the idea that what ECR really is it's not just a place for container images, but there's idea that this is a place for sort of versioned artifacts, right? And a Helm chart is a versioned artifact, just like a container image is. And so this is really ECR looking at more holistically what they can provide to customers and expanding the scope of what kind of versioned artifacts are they supporting within this new spec. I can't talk at length about this because I'm actually less of an expert on ECR than I should be, or that some of my colleagues are. But this is effectively allowing you to have versioned artifacts for Helm charts inside of ECR, and I think it's super exciting. Like this means that you can basically use ECR for a lot more stuff. It becomes kind of the central repository. It has really great management capabilities and the ability to filter things and to assign usage parameters to things and access to things using IAM. So I think this is going to be really useful, especially for EKS users, but actually any Kubernetes user that's on AWS or even not on AWS. So we have a surprising amount, like a surprisingly large amount of people that are using ECR that are not necessarily using ECR with AWS clusters, for example. So if you're using Kubernetes on-prem or running containers on-prem, ECR is also a really powerful container registry that a lot of customers use. So using Helm charts as the artifact there as well.
Yeah, and Bob pointed out, by the way, great keynote, Bob. Thank you for doing that this morning. That was awesome. He pointed out, especially if the Helm chart is generated as an artifact, you might want to use the same artifact repository to store the containers and the charts. And I think that's actually like worth kind of expanding on a little bit, because one of the things that Bob talked about and really hammered home was the GitOps model. And one of the outputs of a GitOps model might be a Helm chart. And so at that point, it's no longer this fluid, parameterized thing. It's a rendered thing, and that makes it an artifact. And so with that rendered artifact, you want to store, at this point in time, I have the code that I was running. That's the container. That's my artifact for that. And then I have the config that launched it, and that's the rendered Helm template. And so being able to go back and reproduce that and have like 100% confidence that you can have that up and running again, and very easily, is very reassuring for customers. They want to be able to just say, like, I can go back and do that anytime I want. They might never do it. When I was a customer, I never actually did that. But knowing that I could and proving it to an auditor that I could was amazing. So I love that possibility.
I think linking them together is super important. I mean, one thing that's easy to forget is that a Helm chart is wrapping usually one or more, often multiple container images underneath, right? And so having a way to version that entire package, not just the config of the chart, but also the underlying container images along with it. I mean, it's really important to understand where your software is coming from, and sometimes it's okay to just take a Helm chart from the community and run it. But if you're building your own stuff, or if you're moving into production, it's good to have a really solid control over what software is going onto your cluster. And so, being able to store those images and the configuration next to each other, I agree with you. I think that's a really powerful concept, and it allows you to have tighter control over what you're running and when it runs, and makes it easier, honestly, to recover from any issues that you might have to quickly roll back if you have a problem during your deployment.
Exactly, because let's face it, gone are the days when you run the same version of software for a month. It's now seconds in a lot of cases. So this stuff is constantly moving and constantly changing. You want to be able to have a very clear picture of what was running when and with what combinations of options and all that stuff. So there was a question about from DK Sierra. Does this mean they also support CNAB packages on ECR or just Helm charts for now? And I think I can probably answer that. It's going to be Helm charts for now. Do you guys know any different? Is CNAB like secretly also part of it? I'm guessing no. All right.
Silence is the answer.
Yeah, we don't have the right people. Yeah, we actually don't. We have a huge crew here, but we don't have the right people to give the details into that right now.
Just knowing how we do things.
I would say check out our roadmap.
For sure.
Yeah, so we have this public roadmap on GitHub. I'll add a plug for that, and we put all of this, all the stuff that we're working on. There you go, Michael. Thank you. Perfect. All the stuff that we're working on, the innovations, what's coming out, we're putting it up there, and we are usually keep that pretty up to date with what's happening, and there's also, if you want to see things from us, if you want to see things from the AWS Container teams, this is a great place to file an issue or make a suggestion, or even just upvote something that already exists if you would like us to prioritize working on that.
Yeah. And Omar is in the chat, the product manager, and he did say we're testing out CNAB support. So
nice.
It's good.
That's amazing. Omar.
I saw another.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Brent. I was going to shift gears. So if you wanted to say something about
no, let's shift gears. I was going to say, hey, Omar, thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Omar.
Yeah.
Nice to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, man.
I want to. All these acronyms. I don't know what this is. CNAB is the native application bundle. You can go to cnab.io if you want to learn about that.
Cool.
So I wanted to just snag a question before we move on. I saw somebody ask, I think, about spot instances in managed node groups.
Yes. That scrolled by quite a ways, so I don't think I can.
Yeah, and I didn't want to leave it.
Yeah, cool.
So the answer is not right now, but we're looking at it, and we can expect that support in a future enhancement. The that's detailed in the documentation, the launch blog, and in the talk that's coming.
Nice. Yeah. So let's just take a second and let's think that through. So managed node groups gives us the possibility for the control plane to manage the auto scale groups and the configuration for workers that are in the data plane. So, you can imagine that a good starting point, we wanted to get that feature out so that people can start using it. But we're going to continue to iterate on that. And, a great place to iterate towards is also layering in the Spot API so that we can start bringing up Spot instances on your behalf as well. So yeah, I mean, definitely find it on our roadmap. Add your vote to it. We'll be working on that. We'll be working towards that.
I've been working, and we've been talking about this quite a lot. I just give a brief explanation of why that isn't available today and why we're waiting to do that. And the reason is that Spot and Kubernetes do go really, really well together, but there's a lot of things that you have to think about to do that right. It's more than just running a node group. There's the idea that you're going to need to select similar instance types. You have to configure them in a certain way. You need to have the ability so that if something goes down and you're trying to scale up, you can actually get the capacity that you need. And so for us, bringing Spot onto managed node groups is more than just like kind of checking APIs. We actually are working to bring you the best practices for how you would set up and run Spot yourself into EKS node groups, and that's really what the team's been working on. So when you see that come out, like that's going to be the idea, is that you won't have to do a lot of manual work to implement those best practices for Spot and Kubernetes. You're going to get those best practices out of the box.
And so I want to pivot now, and there's something that there's a lot of talk about. If you folks are okay with it, and I think we should talk about the announcement of the ACK, and let's maybe dive into that a little bit, because there were some questions around, have we talked about that? Did we already talk about it? Any news regarding this? So I think this would be a cool opportunity, maybe Jay, to just talk about, what it's looking like, maybe, roadmap, what are you guys thinking as you build this out? And let's hear it.
Yeah. This morning there was a pre-recorded session for a Container Day where I went over AWS controllers for Kubernetes, or the ACK project, and some of the slide content there was a little bit aspirational. So we have six service controllers: SNS, SQS, S3, ECR, DynamoDB, and API Gateway v2 that we have slated in our sort of initial tranche of AWS services to push controllers out for. We would like to get 4 of those controllers released as Docker images to, I believe we're doing a public ECR repository for those, and the Helm charts to install those in the next couple days. And then those will be S3, SNS, SQS, and ECR, with DynamoDB and API Gateway v2 following very shortly after. We're still actively testing for all those services. Fast following on those initial 6, we are working on RDS, Elasticache, and EKS itself, and we're going to try and get those out in developer preview within about a month, so mid-September-ish.
And, could we just for one moment just talk about that, because being able to manage, my AWS resources outside of Kubernetes, all in Kubernetes language, in a Kubernetes manifest, I can define an RDS database that my application relies on. That's pretty impressive. So you're moving away from having to manage in multiple places, and you can really bring your management of all your resources into one format, which is
Yes.
Kubernetes manifest, right?
Yes, I mean that's the entire idea behind ACK, right? Is for those folks who want to use the Kubernetes API and the Kubernetes configuration language, and want to stick with just one tool, one set of tooling, one language for describing both their application resources as well as the dependencies of those applications, right? Whether it's RDS databases or S3 buckets or SNS topics, whatever. They just want to use the same language, right? They don't want to use Terraform and or CloudFormation to do one set of resource management and Kubernetes to do another. So that's the idea behind ACK, is just have the Kubernetes language be the only thing you need. However, there are a couple caveats to that. The first caveat, obviously, is we've got, 180 plus AWS services.
Yeah.
So it's not
and growing.
Growing, right. So it's not like we can push out service controllers for all 180 of those at once. We'll try and get there eventually, but we're doing them in these sort of tranches, tiers of services. The second sort of major caveat is we're not initially planning on supporting a service controller for IAM. And there is a very specific reason for that. We just thought that the security posture for an ACK service controller that would be able to create permission sets and roles and IAM entities was just not sort of acceptable from a security perspective, because essentially the ACK service controller for IAM would essentially need to have sort of super user privileges, and it would be able to grant permissions up to and including the permission set that it itself has, and we just thought that was a bridge too far from a security perspective. So at least initially, and I know Bob's probably listening saying, no, we definitely need an IAM controller. But at least initially, we're not planning on supporting IAM as an ACK service controller, which means that you still need to do your IAM setup, your roles, users, organization, permission sets, all that stuff ahead of time. So that's not going to be solved or automated with ACK. However, as we move along and we support more and more AWS services, really IAM, see, I knew it. Really,
He's always watching.
IAM should be the only thing that you need to sort of do ahead of time to set things up. But we'll see, Bob.
That'll be
There
cool.
is a really good question that came up, but did you want to talk about something, Nate? I saw you unmuted. Did you want to add?
Oh, I just saw there was can you put this question up from I am Blood? Because I think that's a great question.
That was the one I was looking at. Yeah.
I am Blood. Yeah, this is a good one. How will we manage state, and what about adopting adopt resource?
Sure. So let me just read this real quick. My eyes are. Okay. So let me back up a bit. So ACK being the ACK service controller for, say, SQS is a custom Kubernetes controller. The state of resources for any Kubernetes controller is stored in etcd, in the Kubernetes API. So the desired state of an SQS queue is the custom resource that is stored in etcd in the Kubernetes API. And so the ACK service controller for SQS is just simply in its reconciliation loop. It's constantly saying, oh, well, I've got, a Kubernetes user has written, or, kubectl applied an SQS queue custom resource, and I need to go and make the actual state in the AWS Service API match that desired state. And that's all it's doing. So for ACK service controllers, they consider the source of truth to be the Kubernetes API, not the AWS API, meaning they're always going to try and make things look like the desired state that's stored in Kubernetes. From a resource adoption perspective, what we are, and there, did Michael actually put a link to the one issue? I think he did. Yes. Cool. Yeah.
Issue 41.
Issue 82. Is
Oh,
the
he's done both.
or
41.
41. 41 is the adopting one. Yeah. So we are
41 is
planning
adoption.
on being able an ACK service controller will be able to quote unquote adopt a resource by the Kubernetes user will place an annotation into that custom resource that indicates the ARN of that particular resource, and that's essentially the signal to the ACK service controller. Hey, this is a new CR, but don't expect it not to exist. Expect it to actually exist and take over the lifecycle management, take over the management of that particular resource. So it'll be a little annotation that'll be the signal to the ACK service controller to take over management of that. There's also a related issue around deletion policy. So what do we do with a situation where, say, an administrator has created an S3 bucket out of band from an ACK service controller. And the ACK service controller then gets sort of notified about this S3 bucket by a Kubernetes user writing a CR that has this little annotation in it. And the ACK service controller for S3 adopts this bucket. Now, what happens if someone deletes that bucket behind the scenes in the AWS console or through the AWS CLI? There's a number of different ways that we could handle that, right? We could say, okay, let's just take the safest approach, meaning we don't attempt to recreate something. We don't attempt to delete something. We just mark it as out of sync, right? With basically place a condition into the CR's status conditions collection that says, look, this resource is out of sync. Our desired state says this. We're seeing that it's different in the AWS API, and we're not going to try and reconcile this because it's irreconcilable, essentially. We could take that approach. We could also take the approach that we just have the ACK service controller just constantly try and make the desired state match, make the actual state match the desired state, and recreate that S3 bucket that was deleted out of band from ACK. I think what we will end up doing is having some sort of configuration per custom resource type or per kind, and even possibly per namespace, where the Kubernetes operator can configure for this particular type of resource, this is the expected behavior when a out-of-band deletion happens or an out-of-band creation or whatever happens, or modification or mutation of that particular resource happens. Because at least from customer feedback that we've gotten, it doesn't seem like there's a one-size-fits-all solution there. For some types of resources, I think people are sort of fine with ACK taking on control of the lifecycle management and taking full operational control over it, whereas other resources, say like an RDS database instance or something like that, there's less comfort there. So
cool.
So I'm just reading Vlad's second question here. Don't even subscribe and SQS can say that's not easy. Self-managed multi-cluster and multi-VPC workers. I'm not entirely sure how to answer that. It sounds a little though like you're suggesting parts of the data plane for SNS and SQS there, and I want to make it clear that ACK service controllers are not going to be touching any of the data planes for any of the data plane APIs, meaning S3 objects, like the SNS subscriptions or anything like that, because that's not really the management plane or the control plane, or like an RDS, the SQL interface, or getting the DB URI or things like that.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is a good natural break. I just want to kind of recap. So for those who maybe are just joining in, this is Containers from the Couch. We're doing a live Q&A for there's some good comments on on why did Jesse and Nate trade spots on the couch. We like to keep the couch dynamic. You know,
I got up to get popcorn.
So
I came back. Nate moved over. So
Jesse's pod got evicted and rescheduled to
and respawn. Actually, I got evicted and respawned. Is the reality.
it was actually
really what happened. It was actually me.
Either way, the good news is we're all here. Although we may lose Nate Tabor in a few minutes, but so we're doing a live Q&A for Containers Day. We've talked about we went over Helm support and ECR. We talked about ACK, ACK, whatever you want to call it. I think that's still up in the air. GIF, and the one thing. So as we were talking about ACK, Bob mentioned a couple times in the chat GitOps, and I think GitOps. There was the announcement of Flux V2 support coming out with Weaveworks. And yes, goodbye CFN. Yeah, I mean, this is And so there's kind of two areas where I want to pivot and talk about. One is, I said pivot again. We should have a pivot counter every time Adam says buzzwords. Bob likes GitOps, I think.
It's
so two things.
If you've ever done it, it is amazing. Like I talk about it all the time because it's so amazing.
He does. I know Brent. He
nice
talks
pivot,
about it all
Brent.
the time. So much pivoting. And
I just realized though that I'm saying this to Adam but we did GitOps at our last if you didn't know this out there in Twitch land, Adam and I have worked together in the past, and when we did, we built a GitOps model before GitOps was a word. Weaveworks likes to claim coining the phrase. Well, they didn't coin the idea. So
they've done some really amazing stuff to make it easier.
Yeah, the tooling around it is next level for sure, and it's awesome. So GitOps.
So I think GitOps, and then I want to talk about the CDKs and how that integrates into GitOps, because if there's one thing I don't like I don't really like YAML all that much, but I love code. I love Python. I love JavaScript. I love coding my desired state. So
how about talking about how ACK fits into GitOps?
Yes, let's start there. So,
and by the way, I will say, because I've had this question asked in a number of customer meetings as well as lots of emails and stuff. But CDKs and ACK are not opposite technologies. They're actually very complementary technologies. So I just want to make that clear. That's like ACK and just frankly, all of the service controllers are not sort of like in conflict with the ideas behind CDKs.
Yeah, it'll be really cool if we can ever get when we get high-level constructs to generate ACK manifests and be able to deploy those.
Right. Well, CDKs will essentially be able to read the custom resource definitions that each ACK service controller exposes and be able to generate the sort of type bindings for a particular IDE and other things directly from that CRD definition. And that's what's really cool, right? And it's a complementary technology.
100%.
You were about to talk about this, hold on, because a lot of people think that CDKs is like the dive bar down the street, right? So I think we should just talk a little bit about what all this is and how this all works together. And CDKs, right? It's her dive bar.
I love
CDK for Kubernetes. Yeah, so the Cloud Developer Kit for Kubernetes is this new project from AWS, and we have a session on that today. Do we already have a session on that today yet? If we haven't had it, then we will have it.
It's not that new, Nate.
It's
not new like ACK new.
It's not new like ACK new, but basically
you can't take the newness from me.
Today is a big day for Jay.
There's something newer in a few hours, so yeah, enjoy it. But you can use this is something that runs locally on your desktop as a dev. I can import a Kubernetes API version. I can import custom resources like ACK custom resources, and I can define them using code. So I can use JavaScript, TypeScript, Python. The team's working on Go support, and I can write out all my my manifest definitions how I want this application to be defined in these, familiar programming languages instead of writing this all out in YAML. And that's really cool because I can do things like share effectively, like instead of writing templates, I can write libraries, right? So I can write a library for how I want, say, like a web service to be defined, or how I would want multiple AWS resources to be defined. And then when I synthesize all that, I get Kubernetes compliant YAML. And so what's cool is, Jay, you're so spot on. These are totally complementary technologies. I can implement any of the custom resources that I might be using with ACK into my CDKs project. I can synthesize that out into a YAML, and then if I'm using GitOps, I don't do a kubectl apply. I do a git commit, right? So I synthesize that YAML, I git commit, it gets applied to my cluster. The Kubernetes API server will start up any standard API objects. The ACK custom controllers will instantiate any AWS objects that I need. And that library that I wrote can be versioned. It can be shared across my organization. It can be packaged to it can be put up to like a package manager. Like I think when we announced CDKs, we had a demo where we actually put how to define a web service and we put it into PyPy. So you could actually download that Python library and then have it versioned. And so it really makes creating code and defining how things work really, really easy. And this is all one big tool chain. And I think that's what's super exciting about ACK is this is sort of, ACK is filling out the part of that tool chain, which is I need AWS resources to help my Kubernetes application. How do I get those? I don't need to go off and get them somewhere else. I can get them directly to my cluster.
Totally. Do you want to try and address Sholi 68?
Yeah, I'll address. So depending, I mean, that's a personal preference. So it could, if you want to get away, if you want to have a lot of manifests, but there still is a world where Helm charts are super valuable. And actually on the roadmap for CDK is the ability to synthesize Helm charts. So I think that there's a world where Helm charts as a packaging mechanism are still very useful, especially if you need to distribute your artifact that comes out of CDKs to people that aren't using CDKs. Like publishing it as a library is really great, but if you need to put that out to the wider community that doesn't, isn't able to pull that library in and synthesize it, a Helm chart is still an awesome abstraction, and obviously it's Helm is very well adopted within the Kubernetes community. So I think that the idea for CDKs is to be able to generate Helm charts and be a part of that Helm workflow rather than completely get rid of it. We think that's still going to be really important.
Yeah.
To import YAML to generate the code. Oh, good question.
Cool.
You know what? I
That's
would
an
say
interesting idea.
go to cdkates.io, go to our GitHub page, and open an issue for that. We'd love to work on that. That's a great idea.
If you want to see some Go code that generates Go code that generates YAML code that generates Go code, then you need to go to the ACK source repository right now.
That would be amazing. It sounds like you could accidentally get it into a recursive loop.
It's very MC Escher.
Yeah. I actually am going to take my leave. I've loved being on the couch. Thank you all for having me. Thanks for coming to Container Day, everyone.
Come back anytime.
See you, Nate.
But we're not leaving. It's just Nate.
No, and now I get to stretch out, which is awesome.
Yes.
I wanted to make a point, like, so, it's interesting. We've watched the advent of DevOps over the last decade, and, sort of like so much of that was the methodology came out of a need, right? It's like we needed to do things in a different way. We needed CI, we needed CD, we needed automation, and the methodology grew out of that. And so it's interesting having people come to that over the last few years and say, I want to buy a DevOps, or what product do I use? It doesn't work that way, right? It's a methodology. It's kind of a cultural shift as much as a technology shift. That's how I see GitOps. I see GitOps as bringing sort of that pivot point of getting, you're having your systems take action for you on your behalf. But instead of, like Nate said, instead of say, tickling a Jenkins job or something, you're actually going to just do a git commit and a push. So I think the power of CDKs and ACK, I'm just going to really want to call it ACK.
I know.
ACK.
I'm going to
call it ACK.
CDKAS. Yeah. Anyway, so the power of like CDKs and ACK coming together is in that tight dev loop, right? It's on your desktop. It's in there,
right?
But it's also programmatic, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, I see developers loving CDKs, right?
Mhm.
I see operators loving GitOps because it takes that human element in a lot of ways. It takes that human element out of operational deployments, right? Um,
He's back. Just
That
keep
was
going.
we lost Brent.
I
But and I see ACK kind of in the middle, right? I think that Kubernetes operators are going to like ACK because it'll kind of like give them one less tool that they have to use for things, except for IAM. And I see I see developers liking it because it's kind of self-service, right? They'll be able to not have to call up some sort of like central IT team to say, hey, I need an RDS database, instance provisioned, or I need this set of infrastructure things delivered. It's like, yeah, CDKs,
right. So
developers,
we're shifting
ACK
left,
sort of
man.
in the middle, and
Yeah.
GitOps being very operator friendly, even though I'm sure Alexis Richardson is sitting there going, it's about developers. But yes.
But that's exactly to your point. That's exactly why I see it at the core of increased and enhanced tooling for DevOps workflows. I mean, that's just keep shifting left. I mean, yes,
you
there
know
are Kubernetes operators that aren't DevOps folks. That's totally cool. We're here for them, and ACK is going to be great for them. And there are developers that don't want to know where their stuff runs. That's fine too. They can do a git commit and a push. But for when you care about all the things, this is just a very powerful workflow. Very cool.
There's another, I saw some of the questions during the presentation and some of the commentary or some of the comments even earlier in our live stream, talking about sort of comparing it or using it in the same sentence as Terraform and CloudFormation, but really like this is still not the same thing because Kubernetes is a declarative in-state type description, whereas CloudFormation and Terraform, you have to describe every single step that you need to take to build up whatever your service
Yeah,
needs
I mean,
to be.
I mean, there's definitely there's definite declarative parts of both CloudFormation and Terraform. I think the fundamental difference really is the language, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the Kubernetes language and sort of way of doing manifests and configuration files. If you just want to stay in that, then ACK helps. The second is who owns the state of the resources, right? In both CloudFormation and in Terraform, they own the state of the resource, right?
Right.
Terraform has its own state storage. CloudFormation obviously is a multi-tenant service that owns its own state. So ACK, the ACK service controllers do not own their own state. The Kubernetes API and etcd are the source of truth for all of the resource state, and that's really the fundamental difference, right? It's that.
Yeah, it's not only about using the same YAML and the same specification style, but it's also about going to the same source of truth for more and more things, which I'm totally psyched about that.
Nice.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Are you familiar with Hendrik Kalau? Sorry. Oh, there you go. Yeah, sorry about that. Wow, you're really good at this. We need to have you on more often. It says Rancher built a Terraform controller that's like ACK but for Terraform. Are you familiar with that one? How how does it stack up?
I'm very, very vaguely familiar with it. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's just our fundamental difference is that where's the source of truth?
Yeah,
and
that was actually going to sort of maybe I don't know if I should ask you this or not, but I feel like you might have an opinion that that you want to that you could talk about a little bit, but. Our very first stab at this was generating CloudFormation, and you alluded to this when you first talked about it, and we got away from that. So what this sounds very similar, where they're using Terraform and generating something different that then goes out and gets executed. So what was the problem that we ran into with generating CloudFormation? Why was that, not the best design?
So in my session talk, I described it as a surprising user experience, and the reason I say that is because if you installed the ASO, the AWS Service Operator, and you wrote an S3 bucket configuration file, and then you went into your AWS console, I think you'd be surprised to see that actually a CloudFormation stack was created, and then there was an S3 bucket inside that CloudFormation stack, and it was the same for all of the different resources, right? And when Chris designed ASO, I mean, it was a perfectly fine implementation to rely on CloudFormation to manage sort of interrelationships between various dependent objects. The problem with that is that CloudFormation has its own state, right? And so if you're using CloudFormation, you're sort of constantly doing like, okay, is the stack done? Is the stack complete? Is the stack it's like this constant, right? You're constantly polling CloudFormation to ask what its status is on this particular stack of resources. Whereas we wanted to have a user experience where if the user wrote an S3 bucket CR, well, that's what got created. Like the calls to the backend AWS Service API were to S3, right? You created a bucket or deleted a bucket, right? You didn't create a CloudFormation stack that then created a bucket, etc. We just thought that was a less surprising user experience, and we wanted to get away from having to reconcile both the Kubernetes source of desired state and CloudFormation's view of desired state, because CloudFormation, its fundamental top priority is what is the state of the stack, not what is the state of the objects within the stack. It's what is the state of the stack, because the CloudFormation stack is the object that it is concerned about. Whereas in ACK land, the object that it's concerned about is the S3 bucket or the SNS topic, etc. So we just wanted to get away from that sort of constant fighting between these disparate systems as to who owns what and what is the fundamental object of which we are interested in the state of.
Nice. That's awesome. And I think that's really going to help, from a longer term perspective. It's really going to help us, stay up to date with, because we can iterate as quickly as whatever that service team's API iterates. We can have our stuff patched and updated.
Yes. So
not that I'm committing you to that. But
well, I mean, you don't have to commit it to or anything, but the reason that that's the case is because all of the service controllers in ACK are entirely generated. There isn't any custom code in it. So it's not like, if the S3 team came out with a new API operation or changed one of their existing API operations, that the custom code that we'd written for the S3 ACK service controller would then need to be changed up, right? We don't need to do that because we just regenerate it from the model files that are in the AWS SDK Go, which includes both the models, which are like JSON descriptions of the API, its shapes, its operations, etc., as well as the actual client. It's called a client API object, but it's essentially the Go linkage, right? So since we generate everything, we don't need to worry about trampling over custom code that we've written for a particular controller. We just simply regenerate it and rerun the tests and fix the problems.
That's amazing. That's going to be so awesome. What else did we? I mean, there was so much other stuff that we talked about. So throw in more ACK questions if you have them. We'll come back to this, but what else did we talk about?
Do people want to know about cross-account resource management?
What? No.
So I
No one
touched
does
on
that.
it. I touched on it in the pre-recorded session, but it is actually something that I'm really excited about. So instead of having to install an ACK service controller for, let's say, S3 or RDS or whatever in multiple Kubernetes clusters, or multiple ACK service controller pods within the same Kubernetes cluster, in order to manage resources in lots of separate AWS accounts with cross-account resource management, which is something one of our engineers named Amin Hilali is working on. You'll be able to have the cluster administrator annotate the namespace with a particular target AWS account ID, and then the Kubernetes user simply creates a CR, let's say of type S3 bucket, in a particular Kubernetes namespace, and then the ACK service controller for S3 will look up the role ARN and call STS assume role within the ACK service controller's basically pivot the client, and allow the single ACK service controller binary that is running in any target Kubernetes cluster to manage resources across multiple different AWS accounts. And that, I think, is really cool. Like you won't have to have multiple, like we're already going to have to install multiple ACK service controllers for each service that you want to manage, because again, we're not using one binary for all service management. But at least you won't have to have like an ACK service controller for S3 installed in 11 billion, Kubernetes clusters if you manage lots of different AWS accounts. And I think that's a really fancy thing.
That is completely amazing, because I can't tell you how often cross-account comes up. This is something that more and more customers are doing, especially big customers, enterprise level customers. It's like their design is starting off with cross-account. So the fact that we're going to support that right out of the box is just awesome.
Oh, not right out of the box.
Not right out of the box. I meant
don't
like,
sign me up for something that's not. No, I mean,
look,
there's still a lot of work
out of a future
box, right? No,
another box coming.
We've made a significant amount of progress on it, but it's probably going to be I'd say 3 to 4 more weeks.
Okay, wow, that's still pretty fast. So that's awesome.
So what are I know you talked about this, but a couple people have asked. So what are the initial set of services, and then what are your sort of pretty solid plans for the near future?
Preface this by saying we were hoping to make a little more progress on actual release artifacts for these service controllers before today. We're still not quite there. We will be pushing Helm charts and Docker images for these services within the next couple days, I promise. But we're not quite there yet. So if you go looking for Helm charts and Docker images for these service controllers right now, you won't find them. You can, however, test things out. There is a testing markdown document that in the developer docs up online that will show you how to test these things with Kind, running in a local Kind Kubernetes cluster. Anyway, so the initial ones that we're trying to get done today, tomorrow-ish, are SNS, SQS, S3, and ECR. The ones that hopefully we get done this week are DynamoDB and API Gateway v2. I was actually, you can't really see my screen here, but I just generated the API Gateway v2 controller.
He's literally working while we're live chatting.
Yes, while actually no, not while we were chatting, while Nate was blabbing away earlier. I generated the API Gateway v2 controller, and it's now generating without errors locally. So I'm going to be testing that out later today. API Gateway v2 and DynamoDB.
That's amazing.
Ship it, yes. Push button. Anyway, so that's this week. Those 6 things: SNS, SQS, S3, ECR, and then API Gateway v2 and DynamoDB this week. And then within a month, we are looking to get RDS and Elasticache and Bob really wants EKS, so I guess I'll do EKS, which is that MC Eschery type thing. However, I will say that the way that we determine which of these service controllers we are going to work on first comes directly from you all, right? So customer feedback, go ahead and hop on to the GitHub issues, or there's a containers roadmap issue as well, where you can provide us feedback and tell us, like we've heard a lot of requests for MSK. That is one that I'm thinking about pushing up a little bit in our schedule.
What about Lambda? Is that on your radar?
So it is on the radar. I haven't looked at it as far as like the Lambda API and tried to generate the ACK service controller for Lambda from the models. I haven't done that yet. Maybe in the next couple of weeks. I am actually taking some PTO at some point in the next like 3 weeks, and I actually planned on generating the Lambda controller and playing around with it during my PTO.
That is not PTO.
So, yeah, it is.
Come on.
No, S3 is not PTO.
That's just PT.
But anyway, so please do feel free to give us feedback on the services that you want to see. We'll go ahead and publish GitHub issues on the AWS controllers Kubernetes repository that will sort of give folks an insight into what roughly we're planning. So I think Michael Hausenblas is on the chat thing here.
He is.
Yes.
The way that we are.
Thank you, Michael. By the way.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
I know
Michael.
it's late in Ireland.
But the way that we're thinking about doing it is going into developer preview for these tranches of services, right? And then within 3 months of when we release developer preview of those services, we'd like to go GA for those services. So the reason I bring this up, there's not going to be like a GA release of ACK, because each of these sets of service controllers is sort of in its own sort of release cycle. So within a month, we're going to try and do developer preview for, like I said, RDS, Elasticache, and EKS. Within 3 months of that, we'll hope to get those three into a GA state, right? So each of the service controller binaries, the Docker images, will be separately versioned, right? So you'll have, there'll be an ACK version of which will correspond to a release of the ACK software, but each of the service controllers will be built at different times, right? I don't know if that makes sense. But
that makes perfect sense.
That made enough sense for now.
And one thing that we are, one thing that I know we need to get started on relatively quickly is how do we test the evolution of the custom resource definition versions from V1 Alpha 1 to V1 Alpha 2 to Beta to V1, etc. And how do we make sure that custom resources that are currently, let's say V1 Alpha 1 and a Kubernetes user upgrades the ACK service controller for S3 to V1. We need to do a whole lot of testing to make sure that the migration of those custom resources happens smoothly. So anyway, I do know that we're going to need quite a bit of feedback and testing from users on that particular issue. So
nice.
And I think this is a good stopping point, because we have a lot of really great talks coming up, and I kind of want to just talk about what's ahead. Again, so Jesse, thank you so much, Jay. Really, that insight into ACK was super amazing, and I know this project's just going to grow. And
this is
I'm really excited. And for me, that CDK
thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, we're going to do it again.
Yes.
Yeah, later today.
Well, so let's talk about that. So coming up at the 30 mark, we have our own Jesse down below. He's going to be doing a talk on customizing managed node groups. We have a Bottle Rocket talk, CloudWatch Container Insights, persistent file storage running on ARM nodes. And then again, yours truly, Brent and myself will be back with a whole new suite of guests doing some more live Q&A. So that's pretty much it. We really thank you everybody for chatting. Thank you for all the moderators who are helping, because, oh my goodness, if we were to answer all those questions on our own, we would be here all day. So up next will be Jesse. But in the meantime, any parting words, Jesse, Jay, anything you guys want to part with?
No, just thank you for your patience.
Thank you for all of your hard work, even while doing the live stream.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's still, I never expected to see that. That's awesome.
Well, Nate should have been sharing his screen, Nate, so I had to do something.
That's right.
That would have been good.
Just go on mute, pound on the keyboard. Okay, one more service. Check.
Yes.
All right. So what should we see? What are we going to see from Jesse?
So I'm talking about customizing managed nodes in EKS.
Okay.
So we're going to go through that, and I probably got carried away with demos. I think there's like 6 in 22 minutes. So
awesome.
I hope. Well, I mean, I hope it's a good talk, but I'll be here as well. And if you have any questions that come up, or if I've missed anything, just yell. And then I think we're going to be back after a couple of sessions after that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We have Bottle Rocket.
Yeah,
Super
which
cool.
is going to be awesome. And we'll talk about Bottle Rocket and stuff in the next session. And by the way, we're live streaming on Twitch, twitch.tv/AWS, but we're also live on our YouTube channel. And we happen to also be on Twitter. But if you're watching us on our YouTube channel or on Twitter, come on over to Twitch, because the sessions that we're talking about are only going to be happening on Twitch. It's free. It's twitch.tv/AWS. Join us there. Ask your questions in chat. We will definitely, we have people there to answer them. And otherwise, we're going to see you guys soon. Try the veal. Yeah. Nice. All right. With that, we'll see you guys in a bit.